look at the Australian newspaper, because their exclusive story on the front page of the Australian newspaper tomorrow, ALP poised to abandon carbon plan as a headline. This exclusive story by Rosie Lewis and Greg Brown. It says Labor's contentious 2030 climate target to cut emissions by 45% could be scrapped amid concerns an Albanese government would not have time to achieve such a reduction if elected at the next poll due in 2022, as Labor leaders engage in a vigorous public debate over the party's policy platform in the wake of the shock election loss in May. Members of Anthony Albanese's parliamentary team have told The Australian that consideration is being given to scrapping the 45% target to focus on a net zero pollution target for 2050. Now, Terry, we know that the coalition, that the Labor Party ran into all sorts of trouble during that election campaign about its climate policy, what it was going to cost, a question that Bill Shorten was unable to answer, really, during that election campaign. What do you think of this move now from Labor?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, if they're saying that they're going to drop the target because they're not going to reach it by 2030 if they're elected in 2022, they're still sticking to a 45% carbon emissions reduction target. And that seems to me to be overly ambitious in terms of ensuring that the Australian economy, Australian households, Australian businesses can actually function. So unless they actually drop the 45% target as well as the timing, I think they're still in the gun.
Caleb Bond, we know that the costings were the issue for the government during the election campaign, but what about this actual 45% reduction target? There's going to be an element of Labor's base who will really want them to commit to this target, to hold firm on that target. But then, as we saw during the election, there are plenty of people out in regional and rural Australia who just said that this was unrealistic, and what they wanted to see the Labor government focus on, or a potential Labor government focus on, were blue-collar jobs.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, there will be a group of the ALP that would prefer them to stick to the target, but the ALP cannot lose sight of the fact that it more or less lives by those working people, the blue-collar voters, who basically believe in the SDA types, the people who believe in the idea of the fair go for the worker, but generally aren't rabid greenies or rabid social left-wingers. And the ALP for some time has had to deal with this push to the left, the drag to the left, because they're worried about the Greens seizing territory from them. But, if the ALP were to form government to deal with this 45% target, you'd really be shooting yourself in the foot, because you either have to go in with an exceptionally ambitious policy in order to make it happen, which then leads into all kinds of issues to do with how do you get there? How much does it cost? What does it cost the economy? What does it mean to jobs? There's almost no way that you can win with this policy other than to appease a few Greenies who are probably going to go and vote for the Greens anyway. So I don't know why the ALP would even want to bother with such ambitious targets, because there is seriously nothing for them to win out of it.
It's an interesting point you make, Caleb, about that divide that we're seeing within the Labor Party. And I might just bring in now Daniel Petrie, who's joined us in our Brisbane studio. Daniel Petrie, the head of media from the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Queensland. But Daniel, in Queensland we really have seen this division play out, and now Labor trying to reconcile itself, trying to sort of assert what its real values are, because it was really torn apart, wasn't it, during the election campaign, particularly in Queensland, by that issue, trying to balance the concerns of those people who might be, the sort of green left types in the inner city versus those in places like Townsville and other regional areas who really wanted to see the Labor Party focusing on jobs.
Yeah, well, and that's right, man. Good evening to you, because the key thing is, once you go north of Gympie, Labor very much is a traditional Labor Party. In fact, they're, very working class, and they rely on really traditional jobs. And that's what this state is. It's a traditional business state. So it doesn't really have the start-up tech vibe, which many people would love to have it. The simple fact is that is what Queensland is, a small business, medium-sized business state, a resources state. Now, when you hold 6 of 30 seats, of federal seats, I should say, it's very difficult to start clawing that back when you're aligning yourself to policies which in the realm of things are just simply unachievable, and if anything, they'd be job destroying in the first blush. But more importantly, the simple fact is, we are a mining and resources country. That's the bottom line, and for people who are opposed to that very view, they need to bear in mind that the schools, the hospitals, the roads are all paid for by the resources states.